Well, well, well.
Well, well, well.
Guess who's back?
Back again.
It's been a long time.
It's been a long time.
It's been an age, my liege.
You especially. I haven't
You
seen
two?
you since you were a married man.
I know.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's very true.
Holy shit.
And
Feels like a different
I
lifetime.
know. And David had was otherwise engaged for the
Yeah.
wedding, so he wasn't there.
I was very jealous actually. I saw all the pictures. It looked lovely.
It was lovely.
Yeah.
It was. And I did I think I was there until about 10:30. I
Yep.
think I was there till I saw someone do the worm on the dance floor, like on top of loads of pizza, and I was like, I'm out.
Good time to leave.
Yeah, but how have you been, my friend? We saw each other at the Crown Plaza.
We did. How am I doing? I'm doing great. I'm busy. I'm enjoying this year. I can't believe it is coming into March. But life is good.
Nice. We've just
Can't you
been-
feel calmer?
Huh?
You seem calm.
I've actually been working on trying to slow myself down, so thanks for noticing, Jamie.
Anytime.
Yeah, and the last year was too busy. So yeah, this year I've been trying to practice what I preach, you know. Can't have a stressed out, burnt out therapist. That
No.
kind of goes against...
No one
No,
needs
we
that.
can't.
Be like, oh, should we really think I'll be... Shut up!
Oh, mate, we've just been discussing how good your hair looks.
Thank you. Yeah, and me and Jamie were both saying that growing hair is the hardest thing in the world ever.
Yeah.
I've never been so self-conscious.
I walked past. At first, I was like, I'm just being really vain. But I think it's because half of me thinks I look really stupid. And then sometimes I'll catch it like out of the back of my hat and be like, oh, look at this. I like it.
And why is it such a big thing?
I don't
I
know.
know. I'm walking around where, like, because it's in the awkward stage where I'm like, everyone's looking at me. Everyone's, and I'm like, they're not fucking looking at your hair. Like, what the fuck?
They're like, your flies are down.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something else. But can you believe we're on season 3?
I know.
Crazy.
It's amazing.
But we've got you locked in for like week to week to week to week to week now. So there's no escaping.
Yeah, we haven't messed this one up.
No.
So we're very glad because your input is always like invaluable.
No, I
and
appreciate it.
you know, we have so much positive feedback about, you know, the little bits of insight that you kind of catch onto from the episodes. And I think, like I said, the whole point that we wanted you involved in the first place was to perhaps answer some of the questions that myself and Jamie didn't feel like we could probably answer ourselves or neither qualified to do. So I'm glad that we've got you locked in.
Yeah.
And so episode 1, we've obviously just finished with the wonderful Leanne Hainsby. What an episode, right?
Yeah. It was incredibly moving and powerful, and it feels like it really kind of hit you both as well.
There was a lot. I didn't know Leanne at all. And there was so much. It was funny actually because there was a bit we cut out because it was just so long. But we both connected at the start of the podcast about our mutual love of alpacas. So there's about a 7-minute segment at the start where we connected on that, and then she spoke about a nightclub called Amadeus in Kent, which is where my cousin took me when I was younger, and I remember the sticky floors. So it was almost like you're like, oh, okay, we're base level, some like very very baseline connection. And the story was really interesting. And then when it just got to her talking about her losing her best friend suddenly, it was just so tragic. And obviously, I think for myself, and I don't want to speak for you, but what you've gone through with Jordan, last year, like there was just, I never say like grief bonding because that's just such a terrible thing. But when you've been through something that traumatic and awful, kind of an understanding. But then to hear her talk about her diagnosis and everything she'd gone through, I was just like, by the end of it, I was like, holy shit. Because there's one word that sprung to mind for me, and it was just resilience.
Yeah. I mean, the world can be incredibly cruel. But there is something that I picked up on that I think I was kind of reflecting on what to say, and I really didn't want to sound oversimplistic or almost give a sense that there's some kind of meaning in suffering. But what I did think was really interesting was that I think this is always possible, that when we experience tragedy, it can destroy us. And it often does. But there's also this other thing that can come out of it, and it's like a renewal or a reminder of how precious life is. And I got that from the conversation. It was like there was an awareness of, life is actually incredibly important, meaningful. It's like when we're hit by some kind of trauma or some kind of acute grief, we're suddenly woken up to the fact of there's my life happening right now. There's people that I love. There's experiences around me. There's seasons. There's all these small things that when we're caught up in work or life, let's say, we lose sight of. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to put a positive spin on it. Like, it's fucking terrible. But I did get some hope out of, or kind of that developed from that grief and from that kind of, difficulty.
That's really interesting, because I really resonate with the fact that I almost feel like the earlier you realise your mortality, the more you can start living. And sometimes the only way you realise that is through death, right, of someone that's very close to you, unexpected, much in the same way that Leanne went through with her best friend, like you did with Sean, like I did with Jordan. And you're right, whilst it's the most horrible thing to go through, you certainly value and cherish life and want to experience everything for what it's worth, right?
Yeah, there's a quote that I'm going to completely kind of get wrong here, but it's something like, death destroys us, but the idea can set us free. It's a very existential idea that, like, sometimes when we're faced with our own mortality, when we know it intimately, it wakes us up. It's suddenly like, oh, life is happening now, and it's important, and it's precious, and I can't waste it. It changes us, I think, grief.
Yeah, it does. And I think it's interesting from yours and I's perspective, because we were in different stages of life when we dealt with that sort of grief. I was still drinking, and I definitely dealt with it by trying to be there for everyone, but ultimately seeking solace and comfort in alcohol, drugs. And it probably took me 2 or 3 years post that to be like, okay, that didn't make sense. I dealt with that in all the wrong ways. Maybe I dealt with grief from my father all the wrong way since I was 9 years old, right? Maybe that's all played into why I drank and did drugs so much.
Interesting though, I don't think you're meaning it this way, but when we say the wrong ways, right, like there's this perfect way to grieve, you know?
Yeah, you're very right.
Destructive maybe, but what do we do with this stuff?
Yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah, and then I was just guessing that from your perspective, you'd spoken so openly about how grateful you'd been to be sober when you were dealing with grief.
Yeah, I mean, being brutally honest, like that, those 2 months following the death of Jordan, in September, it was like, I don't know how I dealt with it, but I did. And it was immediately like, I just need to be there for my sister and my nephews and my niece. And it just kind of went into that mode. And I was very grateful for sobriety, definitely. But we've talked about it before. There's no escaping those feelings when you're sober. You have to deal with them. And I had to. And my anxiety, my health anxiety, it was all chaos. And I was going to the doctors in December being like, I need something. Like, I've never been feeling like this bad. And what shall I do? And, discussed even going on like sertraline or something, and, discussed it because I'd never done that before, but I wasn't coping well. But, decided not to, took a bit of time off, worked on it, did some more therapy, had 5 weeks off post-wedding and really worked through it. But you do have to deal with those feelings and emotions head on. And so whilst I was grateful for sobriety, and I'm really grateful for it now, you can understand why people, perhaps like in your situation with Sean, would have gone drinking substances.
Yeah.
Might have, softened it at the time and allowed you to deal with it later. But
that's what blew my mind about Leanne, right? And what she went through. Because imagine going through like what we've both just spoken about, and then 2 days later discovering a lump on your breast, and then finding out that you had cancer. And I think that's the point I think we should really hone in on here, is that ability or that thought process at that point to be like, I'm going to make changes now because I have to do this for myself and for that person that I've lost.
Yeah, there's like a decision, right? Because I don't think we could blame anybody when experiencing that amount of pain to suddenly turn straight to the bottle as some kind of relief. But the opposite happened. It almost formed, and like you said, there's resilience. And Tom, just on your point, because before you started talking about it, I was like, yeah, so how did you cope? Because when we're in active, not alcoholism, but drinking, it's such a well-worn path that I feel pain, I'm going to drink. that you're right. It's like when we're not drinking anymore, suddenly we turn to what? To nothing. I think it's remarkable that you found a way through. So you went to the doctors, but then you didn't decide to go on some. So how did you work through those feelings?
Yeah, I mean, just the same way as that we talk about I think the best way of staying on the sober wagon is through therapy, through talking, through surrounding yourself with good people, and and then putting into processes all the other stuff that we try and do, like the meditating, exercise, eating good food, just trying to do all of the stuff that will make you feel better, and just persevering, I think, because it is that sense of like overwhelm, isn't it? Like when you experience intense emotions like that, it's like overwhelm. You like, I don't know how to deal with all of this at once. So yeah, it was just a combination of all of that, and knowing that this will pass and it's all temporary.
And do you think it's changed you, this experience of going through that level of pain without taking a drink? Like, has it taught you anything about yourself? Yeah,
I mean, we talk about I think this whole conversation, I think it loops back into exactly what, Leanne was talking about, and, about being that close to death, that I'm so more than ever wanting to live my life and experience as many things as possible, and do the coolest shit with my family and Zach, and go and see the world and do stuff and go to things, making core memories. Like we talk about it a lot. And I think like, if it's taught me anything and it's allowed me to live like that, then that's a learning, right? And it's a positive. And yeah, I mean, I was so grateful for that chat with Leanne, and I felt like we really connected over it. It was such an honest, candid conversation. And I think you're right, resilience was the word that perfectly describes her. And I can't imagine, like you said, Jamie, what she was going through when, with being that close to her best friend, and then with her, probably then going, shit, this is happening to me too, and then doing what she's done. It's remarkable.
Yeah, there was something she said, and I might get it wrong, but it was something like, grief is love with nowhere to go. Grief is love with nowhere to go. And I think that's so incredibly powerful, right? Because in that it says something. It says that the grief is actually not for no reason. It's not meaningless. It says something. It's like we grieve because we care. We grieve because we love. And again, I thought that was a beautiful reframing, which kind of makes, there was another thought I had that's kind of connected here, is about, she talked at one point about kind of being able to talk about all this stuff, the pain, what she went through, but then feeling like, I shouldn't keep talking about it. And I think that's very culturally kind of how we are. It's like, yeah, you can have your 5 minutes of sharing the pain, but don't talk too much. And I think it's such bullshit that we live in a world where we pathologize grief. It's like, okay, we need to get through it now. I shouldn't be feeling this way. No, you should. If you experience loss or tragedy on a profound level, you should fall apart. That is not a pathological response. That makes sense. And I think that's really important, because sometimes, even Jamie, when you were talking a minute ago about like the wrong ways. So what do we mean the wrong ways? This is part of being human. Like, we learn from it, but there's no, there's a shitty idea in therapy about like complex trauma, complex grief, or like prolonged grief, as if there should be a fucking time limit for this stuff. So yeah, I think, I don't know where I'm going with this point, other than to say I think it's really important that we allow the messiness of how grief goes, and also in that find some sort of, not gift, but hopeful place.
I think there's an introversion with grief, isn't there? And people just, because I remember, if I think back to like, not to be too self-reflective, but I remember, the day after my dad passed away, I went back to school, and then I don't think I probably grieved until I was in my 20s. Genuinely, I think it was just like, that's done. And internally you are, but you just don't, because you're like that. And, I spoke about it on my episode, you then channel everything into like work or being successful or whatever. But actually, internally, you're just dealing with it. But I don't think you actually, because you're right. I think there's just such a thing in the world of like, well, that's happened. What's next? I heard this really sad thing the other day, but it was about the idea of seizing life whilst you have it, which was that, if there's 200 people at your funeral, half of them will leave early because they've got to get back to work. Then 20 of those people will leave because they've got to go do calls. And then 20 of those other people will go because they've got to pick their kids up from school. And then on the day of your passing, they'll be left with 5 people, and then they'll have to try and move on. And then, soon you'll be a memory. So the idea that you have to cherish every single moment you've got with those people whilst they're here because they need to live a life after you.
Yeah,
I thought was really interesting.
Yeah,
for sure.
Morbid.
Yeah.
Well, to kind of end it on a hopeful note, it's like, if anyone's listening, it's like, look what we can fucking do as humans. Like, look what we can turn into something good. That series of the grief and then the illness, it's like, it can't get much worse than that. But still, there was a way to dig deep in that fucking hell and use it as a source of growth, of change, of becoming something new. Like, humans are amazing in that way. There's always hope. There's always something we can do in these places. And that, if anyone is listening that's kind of going through grief or whatever, I think that'd be so inspiring to know that it's not the end. Suffering is not the end of the story.
Yeah, I thought she was amazing. And funnily enough, what no one will hear or see is that we probably spoke for another 20 minutes after the end of the episode, and actually probably all opened up and shared a lot more than some of the, because I think it was just like, shit, fuck, we all had so much in common there. And then we all just chatted for another, a long time.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And I think what an amazing guest to kick the season 3 off with. And, I think, like you say, resilience, grief, what we can turn it into. I think there's a really positive message there. And what an inspiring story that Leanne was able to give us.
Absolutely.
It was amazing. You know what's also inspiring and exciting?
1st of May, Leicester Square Theatre. Go buy your tickets.
How are you feeling about it, David? We've just had a little, a little huddle on what's going to be your segment.
Yeah,
I'm doubly excited.
You were both seriously thinking about whether you could find, what was it, a box or a cupboard?
No, a cupboard to wheel you out on.
Yeah.
That would either be funny if people really got the joke, or the weirdest fucking thing in the world.
They'd be like, what kind
depending
of
on how
panto
hardcore
is
the audience are of knowing every episode.
I hope everyone's looking forward to David's strip show segment.
Yeah. No, I'm excited.
Oh, it's the Sober Psychotherapist.
Wow, 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 wow.
You mean Magic Mike?
I love it. No, I'm excited. And it's funny because I just know that you guys are going to be cracking jokes and it's going to be really hard. And then I know that my segment is going to end up being on something related to suffering or fucking death.
The existential shit that is the overwhelming hurtling towards the inevitable death.
There'll be like a depressive moment as I come on, but...
but that's nice though. It's like because I think we want to make it fun and lighthearted and serious.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's what I feel like they think It's All Sober is.
Yeah.
Mainly me just like beelining inappropriate jokes at the worst times.
It's going to be great. So if you haven't yet, please buy your tickets. There's still some available, and we will see you there. It's going to be great.
And we'll see you next week.
Yes.
You're already locked
See
in.
you then.
Au revoir.
Bye bye.